The desert saw it first. Before the gunfire, before the cry, long before Mercy decided whose side it would stand on, the sand already knew how this night would end. It lay under a sky bruised purple with dusk, the wind moving slow as breath through the sage. Somewhere in that wide silence, a single crow flapped lazy circles over the earth, waiting for what men would leave behind. Jonas Hale rode with his hat pulled low, his horse's hooves whispering through dust instead of thunder. He wasn't in a hurry, hadn't been for years. Folks used to say he'd once been quick as lightning, sheriff of Abilene County, before he drew 1 second too fast and killed a boy who wasn't supposed to die. Now he rode as if each mile was a penance. His eyes were gray and tired, his face a map of sun and regret. That evening, the air tasted like rain that would never come. The sound reached him first, soft, broken, wrong. Not a coyote or a hawk. A human sound, thin as wind through bone. He slowed the horse, turned his head. There, near the dry wash, 3 men circled something small, pale, and moving. It took a breath for Jonas to understand it was a girl. Another for him to see what they were doing. They had her by the hair, dragging her through the dust. Her dress was torn to threads, one sleeve hanging by a stitch. Each time she tried to rise, a boot caught her ribs and pressed her down. They laughed the way only cruel men laugh, like it was sport. One of them, big as a bull with a red bandana, shouted something about teaching the thief a lesson. The girl made no sound then, just raised a trembling hand to cover her face. Jonas's fingers drifted toward the gun at his hip. He could feel the old ache rise in his throat. The memory of that boy, the smell of powder. He'd promised himself never again. But promises die easy when the innocent scream. He sat there a long second, watching the men as the sun bled out behind them. Dust danced around his boots like ghosts whispering for him to do what's right. He closed his eyes, whispered, "God help me," and drew. The crack of the pistol split the evening in two. The first man dropped, his laughter snuffed out mid-breath. The other 2 froze, eyes wide, then scattered, one running for the brush, the other fumbling for his rifle. Jonas fired again, grazing the runner's arm, watched him fall and scramble away. Then silence returned, thick and stunned, like the world had forgotten how to breathe. Jonas dismounted, the weight of the gun still burning in his hand. The girl lay in the dirt, breathing shallow, hair matted with blood and sand. When he knelt, she flinched, crawling back until her shoulders hit a rock. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said softly. She shook her head, whispering, "You will." They all do. Her voice was ragged, broken glass, scraping a prayer. He set his pistol down in the dirt where she could see it, then pulled a knife from his boot, not to harm, but to cut the rope binding her wrists. The blade slid clean through, and for a moment her whole body stilled, as if she'd forgotten what freedom felt like. He tore his duster from his shoulders and laid it around her. It swallowed her frame, the fabric heavy with the scent of tobacco and rain long gone. "Can you stand?" he asked. She tried and failed. He lifted her carefully, feeling how little she weighed. "You got a name?" After a pause, a whisper, "Eden." He placed her on his horse, mounted behind her, and turned east toward the dark horizon. The sun was gone now, only a bloodline where it had died. The desert took them in, 2 small souls against a world too wide. They rode for hours without a word. Eden slumped against him half-conscious, her breathing uneven. Jonas could feel the tremor of fear in her shoulders, and beneath it, the slow surrender of exhaustion. Once, she murmured something. He thought he heard, "Thank you," but maybe it was "don't." He didn't ask. Words had a way of breaking things that silence could hold together. By midnight, he found an old way station by the edge of the dry river. It looked abandoned years ago, half roof gone, door swinging slow in the wind. Inside smelled of dust, rusted nails, and ghosts. He laid her down on a folded blanket, lit a small lantern. The light trembled across the cracked walls, painting them gold. She sat up weakly, eyes wide as she watched him. "You shouldn't have done it," she said, voice small. He paused, setting his rifle near the door. Couldn't have done nothing. Her eyes met his for the first time, clear, haunted blue. "You'll pay for it." He looked at the ground. "Already have, darling. Just didn't finish yet." He brought her water, held it steady as she drank. Her hands were shaking so bad the cup rattled. The sound filled the room like the ticking of a clock. Afterward, he cleaned the gash on her temple with what whiskey he had left. She hissed through her teeth but didn't pull away. "Who were they?" he asked. "Ranch hands. From the Halstead place. Said I stole from the boss's wife." "Did you?" Her eyes found his. "I stole a piece of bread. For my brother. He died before I got back." The silence that followed was heavy as the desert itself. Jonas didn't speak. He just sat beside the fire, staring into the flame as if it might burn away what he was feeling. Outside, coyotes called to the moon lonely, honest sounds. Eden lay back, curling into the coat he'd given her. "Why'd you stop?" she whispered after a while. He didn't look up. "Because I know what it's like to wish someone would." They both listened to the wind creep through the cracks. The lantern flickered, faded. For the first time in years, Jonas closed his eyes without fear of who might find him in the dark. But peace never lasts in the West. It began with a faint rumble, hooves, many of them, beating the ground like drums. Jonas sat up, reaching for his gun. Eden's eyes snapped open, confusion giving way to terror. "They'll come back," she breathed. "Stay low," he whispered, dousing the lantern. Darkness swallowed them whole. Through a hole in the wall, he saw silhouettes on horseback. 5 or 6 men, lantern swinging. The one in front had a red bandana. The survivor. Jonas steadied his rifle, breath slow. He waited until they drew close, the light glinting off a barrel. Then he fired. The first shot dropped a horse. Chaos erupted, gunfire cracking, dust exploding. The old way station shook under barrage. Jonas ducked, firing again and again, counting his bullets. Eden crawled behind a crate, heart hammering loud enough to hear. A bullet tore through the wall above her, showering her with splinters. Jonas grunted as one grazed his shoulder, blood soaking his sleeve. He staggered back, teeth clenched. "Reload," he hissed. "I don't." "Take the cartridges." "Do it." Her hands trembled, fumbling the rounds into the chamber. Each one clicked home like a heartbeat. The shooting slowed. A voice outside called, "He's hit. Burn him out." Jonas shoved Eden toward the back. "Go out the rear door. Stay low." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind." He threw the last bullet through the window, the flash lighting his face, sharp, determined, alive again. The men retreated, dragging their wounded. The night went still except for the crackle of a burning lantern overturned in the fight. Jonas staggered outside, gun still in hand, watching them disappear into the horizon. Blood dripped steady from his arm. The fire licked at the doorframe, casting the world in gold. Eden ran to him, her face streaked with soot. "You're bleeding," she said. He smiled faintly, breath ragged. "Ain't the first time." She caught him as he stumbled, her small frame steadying his weight. They stood together in the pale edge of dawn, smoke curling up around them. The desert stretched out endless and empty, but for the first time it didn't feel cruel. By morning, the wind carried their names across the sand like a secret the earth promised to keep. Morning came slow, as if the sun itself was unsure they'd survive the night. Pale gold light spilled to the broken roof, turning the drifting smoke into ribbons of color. Jonas stirred first. The wound in his shoulder burned. His coat stuck to the dried blood. He sat up with a groan, the sound rough enough to wake her. Eden blinked against the light, eyes wide, unsure for a moment where she was. Then she remembered the fire, the bullets, his voice telling her to stay low. She rose to her knees, found a scrap of cloth, and knelt beside him. He didn't protest when she pressed it against his shoulder. The touch was awkward, gentle, full of the hesitation of someone who hadn't been allowed to care for anyone in a long time. "You need a doctor," she said softly. "Had worse," he muttered. "Bullet just kissed me." "You shouldn't joke about that." He gave a half-smile. "Ain't a joke. Just truth," said softer. They sat in silence a while after that. The fire had gone cold, but the air was thick with heat. Outside, the world was waking. The clatter of cicadas, the faint whinny of their horse, the whisper wind through the bones of the station. "You got folks waiting somewhere?" Jonas asked finally. Eden looked down at her hands. "Not anymore. My brother was all I had." He nodded, chewing the inside of his cheek. "Then I reckon you." and me got that in common." He reached for his flask and found it empty. She took it, poured a few drops of water instead, and handed it back. Their fingers brushed, and neither spoke of it. When the heat grew too heavy to bear, they packed what little they had left, a half loaf of bread, a canteen, his rifle, and her courage, and set out toward the faint promise of civilization. Jonas had heard tell of a mission town west of the flats. Said the sisters are tooken the lost. Eden didn't ask what he'd call himself among them, the savior, the sinner, or both. She just walked beside his horse, the hem of her ruined dress brushing her ankles like smoke. The land changed as they traveled. What had been dust became stone, then scrub, then the pale ghost of grass. Once, they came across a river so thin it barely moved, but she cupped her hands and drank like it was wine. He watched her, and for the first time, the sight of someone else's thirst didn't feel like his own. Nights were hardest. The dark made the world small again. Once she woke crying out, her body shaking, eyes wild. He didn't reach for her, just spoke low from across the fire. "You're safe, Eden. They ain't coming back." She nodded, breathing through it, and when she could speak, she whispered, "Why are you kind?" Jonas stared into the fire. "Ain't kindness. It's guilt finding new work." She didn't argue, but later, when he drifted off, she pulled his coat over him to keep out the cold. Days bled into one another until the air grew thick, with the smell of rain. It came sudden, a wild downpour that soaked the dust into mud. They stood in it laughing, the sound torn from somewhere they didn't know still existed. Her hair plastered to her face, his hat dripping, the sky roaring its approval. It wasn't just rain. It was the world washing itself clean. By the time they reached Santo Mesa, the ground steamed beneath their boots. The town looked tired, cracked bell tower, paint peeling, eyes behind curtains. As they passed, whispers followed like flies. A man and a bruised girl on one horse. Nothing travels faster than a story in a small town. Jonas led her to the mission first. The nun at the door, old and sharp-eyed, took one look at Eden and frowned. "We don't harbor women of questionable virtue." Eden flinched, stepping back. Jonas's jaw tightened. "She's hurt," he said. "She needs rest, not rumor. Charity must be earned." He reached into his coat, pulled out a silver coin, placed it on the altar inside the doorway. "Then I reckon God's got her rent paid." They left before the nun could answer. Outside, the air felt easier to breathe. Eden smiled faintly, the first time he'd seen her do it. "You didn't have to do that." He looked at her, eyes soft beneath the brim of his hat. "Reckon I did." He found her work at the apothecary, helping an old woman grind herbs and mix poultices. It wasn't much, but it gave her purpose, and purpose was a kind of home. Jonas camped outside town near the river, close enough to watch her walk each morning, far enough to let her stand alone. Weeks passed. She began to carry herself differently. Chin higher, eyes clearer, a hint of color in her cheeks. When people whispered now, she didn't flinch. She'd survived worse than talk. One afternoon, as she left work, she found Jonas fixing his saddle beneath a cottonwood. He looked up, squinting against the sun. "You've been keeping busy," he said. "Trying to—" She hesitated. "You don't come by much anymore. You don't need me much anymore. Don't mean I don't want to see you." He paused, hand stilling on the leather strap. There was a long quiet between them, filled with the low hum of wind through leaves. Then she stepped closer, resting her hand over his. "You didn't just save me," she said. "You reminded me I could still be someone." His voice came rough, like gravel shifting. "Reckon you saved me, too." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. The air between them was thick enough with what neither dared to say. The next morning, Jonas packed his things before sunrise. When Eden came to the river's edge, he was tightening the cinch on his horse. The sky was still gray with sleep. She watched him in silence for a moment before speaking. "You're leaving, He nodded. "Ain't much left for me here. There's towns out east still looking for a man who'll stand when others turn away." She folded her arms. "Wherever you go, they'll be lucky." He gave a small smile. "Luck don't follow me much." She stepped closer, the hem of her dress brushing the wet grass. "Where you headed?" He swung up into the saddle, eyes on the horizon, wherever they still need saving. Her voice caught as she said, "Then may they deserve you." He tipped his hat, then turned his horse toward the dawn. The sun broke over the hills, flooding the world with light, so bright it hurt to look at. Eden stood there long after he'd vanished, her hands clasped in front of her like a prayer half spoken. The desert stretched quiet beyond the town, golden and endless. Somewhere out there, a lone rider moved through the heat, a faint trail of dust rising behind him. The voice that carries the story speaks soft and certain, like the memory of a man long gone. In the desert, mercy don't come easy. But when it does, it stays, like rain in dry soil, hidden, waiting to bloom. And maybe that's all love ever was out here. Not the holding of hands, nor the promise of forever, but a single moment, a man stopping his horse when no one else would. The wind shifts, the dust settles. The story ends the way the desert always does, quiet, vast, and full of something that almost feels like grace.